Hey everyone, a quick video on inflation. So this channel is on a lot of things, right? A lot of things, but not on everything. It's on finance, investing, wealth management, just because I'm into it, just because I've been into it. That was my first thing I learned and studied. But which within the broader context of a self-improvement program. How do you make yourself a more robust, better, stronger, more capable human being? How do you do it? Achieving more financial freedom, obtaining more wealth and power in a capitalist system in a Western society, that's useful for that. It's not the end in and of itself. That's not the end, but it's a useful thing. And so related to that, inflation is an important concept. Inflation is an important thing to know about because if there is inflation going on, then that's going to literally that's going to erode your wealth. That will literally erode your wealth. So um, I have a lot of experience with inflation, both academically and given my background. My parents um, were born in the former Soviet Union. They were born in one of the smaller republics in the former Soviet Union. They ended up in Moscow, right? They somehow ended up in Moscow, both of them, married with me there. Moscow was like the big city, right? In the whole Soviet Union, that was the capital. It was like the New York times 10. Everyone wanted to go to Moscow, basically, or St. Petersburg, but really Moscow, from everywhere, from all the the lesser states, the smaller states that are now independent countries. So my parents really wanted to go to Moscow. They ended up in Moscow, but in that process, my dad sold basically his apartment back then. It was like a Soviet style apartment, um, and he basically sold it and moved to Moscow, keeping his money in rubles, in Soviet Russian rubles, right? The Soviet rubles, that was the currency across the entire Soviet Union at the time. And so he kept his money in that. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, just in the late 80s and early 90s, as they were thinking of coming, and they actually did come to the US, they basically lost all their money. My dad foolishly kept it in rubles. The government printed many more, and about 15,000 USD became about 100 USD. So my dad basically came to the US with $100. Uh, so basically, he got that 100 USD in like 1990, let's say, for selling his condo, like 1985 maybe. He sold it, waited 5 years, and that 100, that money, that 15K eroded to 100. He could have taken that 15K, put it in anything else that was valuable, even some kind of a watch, dude, even a watch. And he could have come to the U.S. with more money, but he only came with 100. Unfortunately, that's a bitter and nasty and dark example of inflation. Now, there's many stories like that throughout history. Thankfully, in the U.S., we haven't experienced that, but there was some intense inflation in the 70s in the U.S., and some people still remember that, but many people are forgetting. So inflation is a real economic thing. It arises in certain scenarios, right? It doesn't arise in every scenario. If you're using something that's truly scarce, it's not going to be a problem. It arises when you have money based on fiat, based on government decree, and then you have a small group of people, a small group of monkeys that are able to print as much of it as they want, make as much of it as they want. So you're going and working for this stuff, but in Washington, somebody could literally print it. So there's an inherent perversion there. There's inherent perversion. So I can speak clearly on inflation, both academically with my finance and economic academic background, my actual studying investment history, because I started studying investing in the 90s when the 70s were still very, very much in everyone's mind, right? Just like things that happened 20 years ago are still very much in everyone's mind. So I was a little kid reading up and studying on investing, basically. And um, So I have a good conception of what happened in the 70s for somebody that didn't go through it. And I have a even more robust conception of like the real darkness that could arise when it gets too far. Hopefully we don't get to that point in the US, like what my dad experienced, but that was basically a nation state collapsing and failing, and basically just eroding the savings of the entire nation. It was tragic. It was also tragic that the people were not wise enough to offload rubles, literally paper, just like dollars, dude, just paper. They were not wise enough. And then if it's not even paper, if it's on the screen, oh my god, it's even scarier. If it's in a savings account, they could just they have so there's so little control you have over your own wealth. When you say you have 100,000 in a savings account and that's it, you're basically you're at risk quite a bit if that's your only form of wealth. You need to diversify across. Now, not every asset is equivalent, but like money in a savings account, like by government decree, they could just say we're converting the currency one day. If you own a share of a stock, that's a different type of thing. Regardless of the currency conversion, assuming the company itself doesn't make any decisions to sell more shares or create more shares, you're basically going to own the same amount of the company. In real terms, you may lose money if that happens, if the government does some kind of really crazy thing with currency. In real terms, the economy will probably hit a very severe recession or minor depression. So in real terms, you will lose money, but you're still going to own that portion of the company, and then when things recover, you'll do fine. But if you only have cash, and if you only have cash in just an account in electronic form where it's just digits on a screen, you're gonna take a severe hit, and then there's no recovery because now you took that hit, but there's no ownership. It's just you were basically invested. You just decided to store all your energy, all your wealth, all the surplus you've built through your life in basically in paper, right? And then in an electronic form, it's you're so trusting that you're saying this paper, I know it's so valuable, but I don't even need the paper. You just tell me how many of these papers I can get. If I go to the bank, you'll give me this many of these papers. So that's a wild, wild thing. You obviously need currency. You obviously need cash to operate. The U.S. dollar is still, a very good currency, very powerful currency globally, and I love the U.S. dollar. I'm glad I want to hold some U.S. dollars, but you can't have all your wealth in it, and you have to take inflation into account in all your investing endeavors. Especially when we have crazy inflation. When the CPI is saying 8%, that means real inflation is much higher than 8%. So and that's obvious. You're basically, it's a different schema that needs to happen. And I need to talk more about that, I'm realizing, on Shallow Man. So I'll do that at some point. Yeah, inflation, crazy.